The quiet neighborhood of Hillside Grove was known for its perfect streets, where every lawn was neatly trimmed and every house seemed to reflect success. It was here that Margaret and Diana decided to start fresh, leaving behind the struggles in their relationship that had taken years to try and fix. Their new home was luxurious, with huge glass windows, a beautifully landscaped yard, and a pool that sparkled like a sapphire in the sunlight. Margaret looked at the house with hope, thinking that maybe this move would bring back the closeness and connection she longed for in her marriage. Diana, on the other hand, saw the house as a project, something to focus on that would distract her from the growing distance between them. In the first few weeks, they kept busy unpacking and turning the house into a home. Margaret spent hours arranging furniture and hanging artwork, while Diana focused on getting to know the neighbors and finding their place in the community. However, the pool became a special focus for Margaret. She imagined spending warm evenings by the water, laughing, and perhaps rekindling romance with her wife. Diana noticed how much Margaret was drawn to the pool, so she suggested they hire someone to maintain it. She thought having a professional take care of the pool would keep it perfect, just like their new life was supposed to be. Margaret agreed, though she didn't think much about the consequences of this decision. The next week, Ryan entered their lives. Ryan was in his early 20s, with a lean frame and a tan from spending time outdoors. He had an easy charm and a professional demeanor that made him likable right away. Margaret watched from the window as he worked with skill and precision, scrubbing tiles and checking the pool's filtration system. There was something magnetic about him, something that stirred feelings Margaret hadn't felt in years. Over the next few weeks, Ryan's visits became a regular part of their routine. Twice a week, he would show up with his equipment, greet the couple politely, and get to work. Margaret often sat by the pool, pretending to read or sip iced tea, while she observed him. She enjoyed their casual conversations, which gradually grew longer with each visit. Ryan, kind and polite, shared bits about his life, his struggles with school, his part-time job, and his dreams of building a stable future. Margaret listened intently, drawn to his youthful optimism and the simplicity of his worries, so different from the complexities of her marriage. Diana, focused on her job and the demands of fitting into their new community, seemed unaware of the growing connection between Margaret and Ryan. But Margaret, on the other hand, began to look forward to Ryan's visits with a sense of anticipation she hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, as the summer sun cast golden light on the pool, Margaret lingered longer than usual. The sound of water splashing and Ryan's steady movements filled the silence in a way Diana's presence no longer could. The air felt heavy with unspoken tension, blurring the line between friendly interaction and something far more dangerous. For Margaret, the new home was meant to be a fresh start, but it was quickly becoming the backdrop for a secret desire she didn't fully understand. The pool, once a symbol of their new life, was silently changing into the setting for something darker. The summer days in Hillside Grove seemed to carry a calmness that was too perfect to be true. Beneath the neighborhood's idyllic charm, secrets and betrayals began to quietly take root. Margaret, once composed and restrained, found herself slipping into an intoxicating infatuation. Ryan's presence had become more than just a routine, it was now an obsession. Margaret's feelings deepened one fateful afternoon when Diana left for a business trip, giving Margaret the freedom to spend her time however she pleased. When Ryan arrived to maintain the pool, Margaret was already waiting on the patio. The air was thick and warm, and she invited him to sit for a drink after he finished his work. He hesitated, but she insisted with a tone that was both warm and subtly urgent. That moment marked a turning point. Margaret's actions shifted from playful friendliness to something more calculated. As they sat under the shade of the patio umbrella, the quiet intimacy of the setting made Ryan visibly uncomfortable. Yet, her words were disarming, her presence both commanding and vulnerable. Over the course of that afternoon, the boundaries between them began to blur. For Ryan, the situation was fraught with confusion. The kindness Margaret had shown him, the extra tips, the encouraging words, had always been pleasant, but now it felt heavy with unspoken expectations. He found himself drawn into her world, unable to fully understand the power dynamic that was shifting against him. That afternoon, Margaret and Ryan's affair began. What started as a moment of impulsive attraction quickly escalated. Margaret grew bolder, finding excuses to call Ryan over on unscheduled days. She would wait for Diana to leave, then invite Ryan inside under the pretense of needing help with pool equipment or the garden. These meetings, once confined to the patio, soon moved indoors, first to the living room, then to the master bedroom. The house that had once symbolized renewal and fresh beginnings became the setting for betrayal. Margaret reveled in the thrill of her secret affair, a dangerous escape from the routine of her life with Diana. For Ryan, the situation became suffocating. Margaret's demands for his time and attention grew, leaving him unable to focus on his studies or other clients. He was trapped, manipulated into silence with her assurances that everything was under control. As the weeks turned into months, Diana began to notice subtle changes. Margaret seemed more energized, her mood erratic. She dressed more carefully, wore perfume she hadn't touched in years, and spent more time by the pool than ever before. Diana, ever sharp and observant, couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The truth came crashing down one evening. Diana returned home earlier than expected, her work obligations canceled at the last moment. As she walked through the house, she heard muffled voices from the patio. Her heart sank as she approached, and what she saw confirmed her worst fears. Margaret and Ryan, caught in a secret embrace, froze when Diana's presence shattered their moment of deceit. The confrontation was immediate and explosive. Diana, consumed by rage and betrayal, demanded an explanation. Margaret, cornered and panicked, tried to justify her actions, but her words only deepened the rift between them. The once solid foundation of their marriage crumbled in an instant, leaving nothing but raw emotions and broken trust. Diana's fury slowly transformed into a cold resolve. She threatened to expose Margaret, to tell their friends, neighbors, and the entire town about the affair. The weight of the potential scandal loomed over Margaret, and for the first time, she saw Diana's strength and determination. Margaret, however, was not easily shaken. She pleaded with Diana to reconsider, to think about the consequences of going public. She reminded her of the life they had built together, of the family and reputation they had crafted. But for Diana, the betrayal was unforgivable, and the pain of it all was too much to bear. Yet, even in the midst of her anger, a flicker of love for Margaret still lingered, complicating her desire for vengeance. Diana struggled for days after discovering Margaret's betrayal. The pain of her wife's unfaithfulness was unbearable, but she couldn't bring herself to leave. Despite her anger, she still loved Margaret and worried about what the public might think if their carefully built life fell apart. Margaret noticed Diana's hesitation and took advantage of it. After one of their heated arguments, Margaret came up with a bold idea. She suggested they use Ryan's presence to fix their relationship. Margaret made it sound like a way to rekindle their love and repair their bond. Diana was disgusted but curious about the idea, hoping it might give her some control back. Margaret assured Diana that Ryan was on board, but this was a lie. Ryan, already feeling manipulated by Margaret, had no clue what was about to happen. When Diana finally agreed, it wasn't because she trusted the plan but because she was desperate to save their marriage. As Margaret's plan unfolded, Diana became involved. At first, she kept her distance from Ryan, acting cold and detached. But over time, she joined Margaret in pressuring him to spend more time at their house, each interaction becoming more invasive. Eventually, the couple crossed a dark line, exploiting Ryan not just emotionally but for their own sexual desires. What began as manipulation became outright abuse, with both Margaret and Diana using their power over him in increasingly degrading ways. The pool, once a peaceful place, turned into a symbol of Ryan's entrapment. He was no longer there to care for it but to satisfy the couple's twisted demands. When Ryan tried to push back, Margaret threatened him, reminding him of what could happen if he exposed their secret. Diana, too, started to exert control, her initial reluctance giving way to active participation in the abuse. Ryan's mental health quickly spiraled. He stopped going to classes and turned down other jobs, unable to escape Margaret and Diana's control. The once confident young man became withdrawn and hopeless, with no one to turn to for help. Margaret and Diana justified their actions in different ways. Margaret told herself that Ryan's obedience meant he agreed, while Diana believed she was just trying to save her marriage. But their home, once a place of happiness, turned into a prison of guilt and lies. Everything came to a head one night when Ryan said he wanted to leave for good. He told Margaret and Diana that he needed to focus on his own life. Margaret's response was cold and threatening, reminding him of the consequences if he exposed them. Diana, standing by her wife, felt uneasy. She hadn't wanted things to go this far but felt trapped in Margaret's schemes. As Ryan left, the couple watched from the window, their house now full of secrets and deceit. But the weight of their actions was becoming impossible to ignore, and the consequences were drawing closer with each day. Ryan's life fell apart under the weight of the abuse he suffered. The once lively and ambitious young man who worked hard to support himself was now a shadow of who he used to be. He avoided his friends, skipped family gatherings, and felt too ashamed to tell anyone about his situation. His grades dropped, and the hope he once had disappeared. Every day at Margaret and Diana's house felt like a struggle. Their demands became more invasive, and their control over him grew stronger. Margaret convinced herself that Ryan's silence meant he agreed, while Diana, who had once hesitated, now accepted everything without protest. What had started as a plan to save their marriage had turned into something much darker. One rainy evening, Ryan sat alone in his small apartment, staring at a blank page. He had tried to write a resignation letter to Margaret and Diana many times, but the words never felt right. He knew the risks of leaving. They had made it clear they would ruin him if he tried to walk away. Their threats hung over him like a heavy cloud. Despite his fear, Ryan decided to quit. The next morning, he arrived at their house, determined to end things. His hands shook as he rang the doorbell, rehearsing what he wanted to say. Margaret greeted him with her usual fake cheer, and Diana stood behind her, looking serious. Ryan took a deep breath. "I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice trembling. "I'm done. I need to leave." Margaret's smile faded as she exchanged a glance with Diana. "Ryan," she said coldly, "after everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" Diana stepped closer, her tone harsh. "Think carefully about what you're saying. Don't make a mistake you'll regret." Ryan froze, his worst fears playing out before him. Their words felt like chains, holding him in place. Margaret leaned in, her voice low and threatening. "You're part of this now, Ryan. There's no walking away." Defeated, Ryan left the house. His plan to quit had failed, and the couple believed they still had control over him. But Ryan was breaking under the pressure, closer to the edge than they realized. Weeks passed, and Ryan's mental health worsened. He stopped going to classes and spent sleepless nights drowning in despair. His world felt like it was closing in, with no escape in sight. One morning, Margaret and Diana woke up to devastating news. Ryan's body was found near their pool, his life tragically cut short. He had left a simple note that read, "I couldn't take it anymore." The discovery shocked the neighborhood. Police arrived, and the once beautiful home became a crime scene. Margaret and Diana tried to act calm, but detectives began to uncover the truth. Their carefully crafted lives were falling apart. As the investigation continued, the full extent of Margaret and Diana's manipulation came to light. The pool, once a symbol of wealth and beauty, now stood as a haunting reminder of the darkness that had consumed their lives. The discovery of Ryan's body sparked an investigation that Margaret and Diana weren't prepared for. The once quiet and perfect suburban neighborhood was now filled with gossip and suspicion. News of Ryan's tragic death spread quickly, and with it came an endless stream of questions. Detective Harris, a skilled investigator known for his attention to detail, was assigned to the case. From the start, something about the situation didn't sit right with him. The couple's story made it seem like Ryan was a troubled young man with personal issues, but inconsistencies in their statements made him suspicious. As the investigation continued, detectives found a series of text messages exchanged between Margaret, Diana, and Ryan. These messages showed clear signs of manipulation and control. Ryan had tried to distance himself, but Margaret's constant demands and Diana's subtle threats were evident. The turning point came when surveillance footage from a neighbor's camera was discovered. The footage showed Ryan visiting the house often, and more importantly, it captured him looking distressed as he left. This evidence contradicted the couple's claim that their relationship with Ryan was strictly professional. When detectives confronted Margaret and Diana with this evidence, their defenses began to fall apart. Margaret tried to shift the blame, saying Ryan had willingly agreed to their arrangement. But Diana, under pressure, broke down during questioning. She admitted to the manipulation and abuse, naming Margaret as the one who started it all. The media quickly picked up the story, turning the couple's private shame into a public spectacle. Headlines called them predators who had taken advantage of Ryan, and their once perfect lives were now exposed. Neighbors who had once admired them now turned away, their looks filled with disgust. The trial became a media frenzy. Every action of Margaret and Diana was under a microscope, and the prosecutors presented a strong case, painting a vivid picture of their wrongdoing. Testimonies from former friends and co-workers revealed the cracks in their seemingly perfect marriage, showing the dysfunction that had led to their actions. Ryan's family, devastated by his death, attended every day of the trial. His mother, a quiet but strong woman, gave a heart-wrenching statement about her son's dreams, his struggles, and the pain of losing him so tragically. Her words deeply affected everyone in the courtroom, including the judge. The jury didn't take long to decide. The evidence against Margaret and Diana was overwhelming, and their lack of remorse sealed their fate. Both women were convicted of sexual abuse, coercion, and contributing to Ryan's death. They were sentenced to long prison terms, and their futures were now as bleak as the lives they had destroyed. In their separate prison cells, Margaret and Diana had time to reflect on their actions. Their once loving relationship had turned into bitterness, with each blaming the other for their downfall. Ryan's death left a permanent scar on their lives and the community they had once tried to fit into. Their story became a warning about the dangers of unchecked desires and the tragic consequences of manipulation and abuse. The house they had once loved now stood empty. Its pool, once a symbol of luxury, was now a haunting reminder of the darkness that had lurked beneath the surface of their lives.